Lady. Oh, here you go. Yeah. Yeah. Feel free to go with the music.
Too loud?
No, I can barely hear it.
Better?
Yeah.
It's cranked over here.
Perfect. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Crime and Culture. What is going on? It's Tuesday night, January 18th, 9 p.m. Eastern. We are here. It's Crawlspace's Crime and Culture. I am Tim, here with Lance, as always. What's up, Lance?
We are just rocking out to a little Rob Zombie. We're trying to figure out the right music to intro our guest this evening, and this felt right. This felt totally right. Thank you for joining our live stream, JW Walker, and everybody out there. This is the second one. I already feel the energy is better this time around because we kicked Instagram to the curb this time. You're done. You're done. You're out.
Instagram. Yeah.
All right. Fading out.
JW Walker, welcome to the show. I almost messed it up already. I knew I was going to say either JW author or author of several books.
Well, I'll throw you another loop. It's I answered to two pronunciations. My other pronunciation is ochre, so you have to deal with like J ochre sometimes. But both of them are right. I like both of them.
Okay.
Which one do I like better? That's the question.
I've got friends for like a decade that don't even they're confused about my last name because I answer to everything. So like they just don't know what to call me anymore. They know me for so long. But also, thanks for the zombie. I'm really a big fan of Rob Zombie, so I appreciate that intro for sure.
How do you feel about his new album?
I haven't heard it yet. So, man, I'm so inundated by like media that I am behind on the world. The entire world I'm behind on. So you can ask me probably about Facts of Life. I've been catching up on that lately. The monkeys. I'm right there, right the 1960s, and then I can get the rest of the decades here hopefully soon. But
this is a rare evening when the Facts of Life is referenced. We went from Rob Zombie to Facts of Life.
Well, I mean, he's doing the monsters, right? He's back in the 60s these days, right?
That's true.
That's true. Yeah. And we do have a Brady Bunch reference in our interview that is coming to the Crawlspace podcast airwaves tomorrow, Wednesday, January 19th. We did an interview with you, and we talked about your incredible book, Cursed Objects, Strange but True Stories of the World's Most Infamous Items. The conversation is amazing, and I can tell we've already sort of recreated the same energy here tonight.
With all sitcom references. Right. Good.
Well, yes. Welcome to the show. And your book is excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about your book and why you wrote it?
Sure. So, well, the book idea came out because so in the spooky world, there's all kinds of like paranormal stuff and ghosts and haunted houses and, you know, all these different topics in this world. But for some reason, nobody had really put together a compendium of like the most famous cursed objects. It just wasn't out there. There's a lot of like listicles and a lot of YouTube videos, a lot of books about people's experience dealing with cursed objects as a topic. You know, people who go in and try to like deactivate them or whatever, or collect them, or whatever they do. But nobody just tried to tell all the stories together in one place that doesn't go too deep. Each essay is probably under 1,000 words, so it's not like a hardcore breakdown of each individual cursed object, but just enough so that you know the top 45 cursed objects in the world to avoid. In other words, it's a safety guide at the end of the day is what it is.
So how does one get into this? Where does this darkness come from in your soul?
We all just the world pushing you down. I don't know. Like, so my background, I grew up with like the signs. Every kid has those like monster kid signs. Mine kind of very early, like in the first 7 years, mine incarnated with like, you know, I had rubber monsters. I love that. When everybody played Star Wars, I had to be Chewbacca. It just had to be Chewbacca, the big hairy monster. But I grew up like very religious, so it wasn't really a thing. Technically, it wasn't really a thing you got into. except that religion is super, super dark, right? I went to a religion where like people are getting cast into hell for eternal torment and eaten by worms, and there's devils and demons all around you, and witches and holy ghosts. Holy ghosts aren't supposed to be scary, but in my head they were always scary. He was always scary. They were always scary. Whatever it was. It was really kind of so I like to attribute it to that, but the signs were there before. I went through my religion phase, and these days I just like the aesthetic. Something about, I don't know, something about a skull just makes me happy. The shape of an old New England graveyard, that feeling is just like, I don't know, it's an aesthetic almost. And then the stories are just more fun. It's kind of weird to say the darker stories are more fun, but they just are. They have this edge to them and this like power to them, and this like stakes, real stakes. Like your soul is at risk for every single one of these stories, whether it's again a haunted house or a cursed object. Your soul is always at stake, and I just like that about the dark stories.
Well, I think the last time that we spoke, you did not have a skeleton sitting in the leather chair behind you. You have one sitting in the leather chair behind you. I get what you're saying though about like that look of the skull. It's aesthetically pleasing in sort of this darker way, a morbid way, a macabre way. What is the skeleton behind you though?
I think it's so whatever. We took down our Halloween decorations end of October, and you throw them in the garage, you throw them in the attic, you throw them in the basement, and there's one or two of them just like, do I really want to fold those up and put them in a crevice, or do I just want to keep them out? So I have one here sitting in my chair. I have the room next to me is a TV viewing room. There's one sitting in the couch over there. I'm never going to store a skeleton. I'm always going to have it somewhere in my life, in my space, except, whatever. If I have very important Zoom calls, I'll move them out of frame for sure. Oh, not that I'm saying this is not a very important Zoom call. I just assume you guys are okay with it.
Well, that's the show, everybody.
So
why not curses? And why specifically cursed objects?
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a good question. So, anything can be cursed, right? It can be curses. It can be just pure out of your mouth curses. It can be places. It can be ideas. But I'm really obsessed with like physical things, physical sites. I got into this world of writing and traveling to weird stuff because, I like the stories, but the stories by themselves are kind of empty for me, right? Like folklore is cool, but usually it's not alive for me, right? You tell the story to each other. It's in the pages of a book that's shut on a library shelf. So if the story can be tied to a physical object, that could be a house, a natural object, a memorial, a plaque, that really makes me happy. If I can fit it in a camera frame, or if I can take a selfie with it, that's exactly what I want to do. And I remember, it's funny, I started this before the backwards camera on cell phones was around. I'm not going to say I started before cell phones, because that's definitely not true. I'm not that old. But before the backward camera on cell phones, it's a common thing. So I used to have to like cart around. Backstory is when I do it for my website, it's odd things I've seen. So the eye is very important there. So I have to take a picture of myself with the thing before I talk about it. So I was carting around tripods and having to use timers and remote controls. And like these days, just flip your phone around and you have a picture of yourself with everything. But that physical site is so important to me. I always use the example. There's a graveyard not too far from me in New Boston, New Hampshire. And there's a stone in there of I think it's been a while since I looked at the story, but it's a 17-year-old girl, I believe, who was murdered. And right on her stone, it says she was murdered. They just put it right in her epitaph. Her parents are buried beside her. They have stones, but her stone just says right there, she was murdered. And then it names her murderer right there on the stone. And it calls him out. So literally she shares a name with her murderer. And so to see that, and the story, I could tell you the story badly right now. Obviously I'm telling it badly, but I can tell you the story of her. It was a lover's triangle, right? Where she fell in love with somebody else, and the one that got spurned decided to even everything out with a bit of murder. So, anyway, so his name is on her epitaph. As not just an accusation, he was found guilty. But then, if you walk 20 paces to the south north of the stone, the murderer is buried there. So this entire story, that's a real story, historical chapter, just sounds like a story you'd read. The actual players are right there in that graveyard, topped by gravestones. It just makes that story so much more real to me. Like, every time I go to one of these sites, it like creaks open the world just a couple more degrees for me. It makes everything more real, makes me understand more. Because usually, if I'm not leaving my house, I don't know anything but my house. But every time I go see one of these things, and it actually happened in a physical space, and a physical object was involved, it just makes the world more real to me. And I have that problem of assuming the world's not real if my eyes are closed. So it just really helps me figure things out.
And is that sort of feeling and that you long, is that sort of unique to the New England area?
To see these objects.
Well, I guess, yeah, I guess you had mentioned, a New England graveyard,
Mhm.
and is there something different about this area? I guess is maybe a better question.
Oh yeah, totally. I'm a transplant. So I grew up in the mid-Atlantic, Maryland and Virginia, all the way around. I lived in like 8 counties, all the way around DC. You can just track my circle around DC. And that's where I started this whole thing. So I started my website. So I was, visiting, different things like that. But New England had always pulled to me. I used to do a road trip up to New England, excuse me, in the fall, when the leaves are on fire, and I'd go to Salem and all those kinds of things. And I just love the area. So I moved up here specifically because of that, New England. I love the falls. I love the winters, even though this winter, whatever, mid-January, I've had to clear my driveway one time, which I really hate. I love snow. But it's age, right? It's the oldest part of the country. Although the graveyards date back to the 17th century, you see the literally 1600s on the gravestones, and they're everywhere. Like I go to I go to a store and I pass 4 tiny historic graveyards. They're just everywhere. It's old. So I think New England does have it. Well, no, it definitely does have a certain feel to it. And you kind of see that in literature, right? Anytime somebody's trying to write a horror story or film a horror movie, they're always tempted to film it or set it in New England because there's just that vibe to it. And then there's that phenomenon that so many classic horror authors come out of New England, right? Stephen King, Poe, and Lovecraft. Edith Wharton and Shirley Jackson, all either lived or did their time in New England, and it's just kind of that kind of place, old and creepy is what it is, and I love it for that.
Let's see. You mentioned Salem, a wonderful little city. You spent a month in Salem because you wanted to experience like the culture there in the most firsthand way possible. I think a lot of people are fascinated how someone can make that decision with the family and be like, can we do this? And you talked about it on our interview before, but I just love the story. Like, regale us with it.
Yeah. And I look back on it as kind of an alien decision myself. I kind of don't know who that guy was that was able to do that. But so I just finished another book, the Poland, where I just visited every site connected to Poe, whether it was an object, piece of his hair, or a site where he stayed, his like houses and his wedding suite. Or if it was like a memorial or a statue or whatever, all those things. But I had to do a lot of traveling for that book. I had to go to like 6 or 7 states. I had to go to England because he lived in England for a few years, and I was beat at the end of that book. At the end of that book, I was just beat up. But I still wanted to write, and I still was only at the time I couldn't sell fiction at the time, so I was still doing every other book was gonna be non-fiction. So just one day I realized I was just laying in bed and I was like, how do I do a stay log instead of a travel log? Is that a thing even? And then Salem hit me. Like I was like, the way I treated Poe, I kind of made a biography of him by piecing him together from the sites he lived at. I could do that to a city, like just piece a story together from a city, and it had to be Salem. It wasn't even the idea then Salem. It was Salem then the idea, because no city's like Salem. It's just so unique, so in every single way, way more unique than people realize. You say Salem to people, they'll immediately think, oh, it's a unique, weird town. It's 20 times more weird than you think. So I had that idea. I bounced it off my wife, Lindsay, who's also a big fan of Salem. We go multiple times a year. And she was like, how are we going to do that? You've got a job, we got a family, they're in school. I think what helped out a lot is I only live maybe hour and 20 from Salem, about 45 miles. And, it's still, I had to do it in order to write about it. It couldn't be a weekend project. I couldn't write about Salem and just go there on the weekends. It just wouldn't be valid to me. I mean, you could do it, I guess, but like, it's just not my kind of thing. So I had to go all in. And that meant living downtown Salem. It had to be downtown Salem. I had to be able to like smell the witch incense, like out my window, or watch masks bob by. I couldn't just be outside of the city. Again, if I was like 5 miles outside the city, I might as well be at my house 40 miles away. So we really had to do it all in, and it just worked out. I got so many good bounces. The first hardest thing, which I didn't realize, was finding a place in Salem, right? It's booked up forever. Even though I got started probably 10 months before October to find the place. man, I had to do some wheeling. I got so many, like, I lived in two places, both of them on Essex Street, which is the main drag of Salem. And I found a house for half of it and a house for the other half of it. But I had to, like, take a shot from half court both times, and it just happened to work out. The first one was like, I was on a tour, a Nathaniel Hawthorne tour, and I knew the tour guide, and one of the people on the tour was his friends, and they introduced us. And then that friend had a dog crisis and needed somebody to watch a dog, so we offered to watch the dog. And then they knew somebody who had a house I could stay at. And the other house was like, I was Airbnb-ing like crazy, but everybody was booked. So then I realized, I should find somebody who does Airbnb at their house, but doesn't do it in October. That means they're willing to leave their house. They just don't do it in October. So I found somebody who I could just buy, go take a vacation for 2 weeks. Let me have your house. So that took a lot of convincing, but it worked out. And then, like, I figured I lived there. I worked from there. I met tons of people there. We were there every single day. The kids we just whatever, took them out of school. What are they going to do? But they were very supportive and, like, gave us, like, whatever lessons plans for the kids. I don't know, all the pieces fell into place. I don't know. It was I'm kind of rambling on about it, but it was one of my favorite times of my entire life. That single month technically is how long I lived there, October 1st to left the morning of November 1st. But of course the project was about a year, so I was back and forth and, like, doing a lot of other stuff. But man, that was one of my favorite times of the year. So anytime somebody brings up the book and says, I like the book, I'm just like, that's like a year, my favorite year of my life, in the pages in your hand. And that makes me so happy that you dug it. But yeah, it's a fantastic city. I almost moved there afterwards. I had to, like, fight that temptation.
Very cool.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm just kind of curious. I want to delve a little deeper into it, because you said that it's unlike anywhere else. And, if you've been there, and I've been there, and it's hard to put my finger on, like, what it is about it that makes it so unique, but it is crazy in a certain way. Yeah. Can you help me with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Real quick. I don't believe you mentioned the name of this book.
Oh yeah. It's called A Season with the Witch.
Season with the Witch.
Yeah, okay. Season with the Witch. The opposite of the Donovan. I changed 2 letters out of the Donovan song.
The great title.
Thank you. I actually fought against it. It was my title. I pitched the book under that title. They liked it, and then halfway through, I'm like, man, and then whatever, stupid marketing head. That's gonna be hard to find for SEO reasons, right? People are gonna just Google's gonna correct them to Donovan every 2 seconds. And finally, I talked to my editor, the publisher, and I was like, hey, can we just change this? How about I came up with Salem for a spell, which is okay, but it's very soft. And he was like, nah, your first title's better. We're gonna go with that one. So yeah, I like it. But again, I feel like it hasn't been confusing, I guess, but I feel like it should have been. But yeah, Season with the Witch. I didn't write the subtitle, so I always forget it. But the madness and mayhem of Salem at Halloween or something like that. So, but it's what was the other? The layers. Yeah. So, reason why Salem is so weird. If you ask somebody why is Salem weird, right? They'll say, in 1692, witch trials happened, killed 19 people, and now they celebrate it 350 years later. That's true. That's very weird. But there's a lot of other layers to that. For instance, the Salem witch trials were not the first witch trials in America. That was the first ones were in Connecticut, and they were like decades before the first witch hung in Salem. They even abolished witch hanging in Boston years before it even started in Salem. So it'd been around forever in the States. And it wasn't the largest, wasn't the in Europe. They spent decades hunting witches. The entire city.
Oh my God. Scotland would do it forever.
Yes. They're just thousands and thousands and thousands of victims. So why this, little tiny town north of Boston, why'd they get the cred? And especially since they were known at the very beginning of their life to be the first maritime city. They were the major maritime city of the U.S. They're the ones that mapped out routes to Asia and India. They brought pepper to the States. They were all the mansions. Salem was full of old mansions, all built by sea captains. It was a very salty state or salty city. So they had this, and then what happened is their bay kind of thinned out. Then New York and Boston popped up and took all the cool traffic. But so this massive maritime history, massive historical history. They're one of the earliest cities in the country. They had this witch trial, and then the Halloween scare of the 1980s happened when that Tylenol, when the tampering with Tylenol thing happened, and everybody was too scared to send their kids out to Halloween. Salem threw their first kind of big Halloween party that year because everybody was so afraid to send out their kids because they're afraid they're going to get like poison candy, that lots of cities across the country would just do civic parties. Just come to the center of town. We'll do some, safe candy and stuff. And Salem did that and kept doing it and kept doing it. Their first party was like a day, like every Halloween party back in the day. Then it was a weekend. Then it was every weekend in October. Then it was 2 weeks long. Then it was a month long. So the maritime history, the witch history, the Halloween history all converges. And the fact that they're not totally comfortable with that. So there's a lot of people in Salem, a lot of locals who hate that they are a witch city. Hate it. That's people who just want it to be a city. They're like, we're beautiful. We're like Gloucester. We're an ocean. We're a North Shore town. We're a great city for that. So they hate that. They hate the crowds. They hate not being able to get out of their driveway. Actual witches in the city, that's a whole nother layer, right? So Laurie Cabot comes in the 60s, I think it was, or 70s maybe, and makes a mecca for all American witches, right? The number one destination. These days, you can be a witch anywhere and it's fine. It's cool, actually. Back in the day, you couldn't. It was a lot harder to be a witch out in public, and you didn't know where to go. There's no internet to connect you with other people, other covens, that kind of thing. She started it all right there. Started the first witch shop right in Salem, and they kind of hate Witch City. They're like, we're not ugly crones with bent noses and moles on our bridges of our nose. We're people that celebrate this religion. So you have that layer to it. So you have, fake. So you have fake witches in the colonial times. They weren't real witches, obviously. They were accused of being witches. You have modern Wicca witches in Salem now. So there's that big kind of friction. And then there's, the pop culture witch, right? They have a statue of Samantha from Bewitched right in the middle of town because they filmed a few episodes there back in the day. So you have like multiple different kinds of witches. You have all these histories. And it's just, once you start putting all those pieces together, and again, they have one of the largest, they have, I think the 9th, maybe it's 6th these days, largest art museum in the country by area, just by floor space. Massive, the Peabody Essex Museum. And for a while, it didn't like the witch trials either. It wanted to be a very, very august art museum, which they still want to be. But these days, they're a little bit looser on the local history as well. They'll do that now. So they have all this kind of just all these battles. And then there's the religions, right? So you have Wicca, and you have Halloween, and then you have Christians, right? Every year, Halloween, you have people standing on the corners, preachers preaching against Halloween, preaching against witches. And it's just this massive just cauldron of opposing forces all bubbling together into this amazing city. And on top of that, the most recent change, I think, happened. It was happening at the time I was writing the book, which was I was visiting in 2015. Book came out in 2016. Happening a little bit, but definitely happening now is that Salem is an official, like, legit suburb of Boston. So it's getting gentrified a bit. As far as gentrified in this case means, whatever people, young professionals are moving in, not to celebrate witches and Halloween, but to have 20-minute train commute to Boston, right? And what they want is nice restaurants and places to go and boutique shops. So that's happening in Salem too. They have a great restaurant scene there. So it's just all these forces just pushing and pulling. So that's the other thing about the book, is that it's about the city, right? So most Salem books are about the witch trials. This book is the witch trials are there because it's a huge vein of what the city is, but this is about the weirdness that is Salem. And none of it makes sense. Like even all those pieces I kind of outlined, once you kind of plot them out, they still shouldn't have ended up the way they did. They should have collapsed a few times. They went through a bunch of industries growing up before they landed on tourism. They were a leather district for a while after the maritime dried up. They had Parker Brothers was started and headquartered in Salem. The Parker Brothers were Salemites, and the Ouija board was first manufactured in Salem as far as mass produced goes. So all these pieces are just, I don't know. It's such a weird city, and try that with any city. New York, right? The most varied city in the country. It all kind of makes sense. New York does. All the different pieces of New York. It's it's a puzzle piece of thousands of pieces, but they all fit together. You kind of get New York, But Salem, you can pick at it forever, and that puzzle will never quite form.
It's super interesting that you go to these locations and you're seeking out these sort of darker, weirder elements of it, but you get a history lesson when you read your work. You do get a history lesson that you wouldn't have gotten through other channels. And I'm wondering, like, is it which comes first? Is it you being interested in the history of a place, or you looking for something that's weird and then going, the history is pretty cool? You know what I mean? Or or you, like, Salem's a good example. Like the history of the city is amazing without the witch stuff.
Comes first.
I would
agree.
the weird always comes first. Like that's going to draw me every time. And then once you start like picking apart the weird, there's a reason why the weird is there, right? In Salem, in anywhere, right? There's a reason why it's there. So you start picking on, because any place, again, weird usually means it sticks out from the norm. That's what weird is, right? It's kind of forward from all the static of everyday existence. But weird always has a chain of events that makes it weird. It's not like just doesn't happen. So if you enter at the weird, you'll start seeing the history. One of the ways I phrase that, and I don't know if this is helpful or not, a lot of my weird is macabre, right? Weird can be 1,000 different things, but I'm really into the macabre part of weird. And the way you get to macabre is just stories is just people dying, right? That's history. History is just dead people, right? So you have enough people dying over the course of time. You have a lot of weird, a lot of macabre weird, and that's New England, right? 400 years of people dying is what it is, and that just opens up the opportunity for lots of macabre stuff. So it always enters the weird. But I love that question because I've never really thought about it that way. But that is exactly it. That's the kind of the fishing lure that puts the hook in my mouth is what's the weird.
Interesting that you said history is like the macabre, like a history is full of dead bodies.
Mm-hmm. It's all it is. True. All history is death. It's us learning about dead people doing things that, whatever, a long time ago. But again, that's why graves are so cool. I mean, I don't, whatever. I know we're as a society pushing away from graveyards, and I'm cool with that too. I don't know if I want to get buried, but each of those stones represent an entire life. It's just decades underneath that stone, and it's fascinating that we can kind of still see a physical, a physical incarnation of that dead person, right? It's like a hand raised in the air saying, hey, what I lived and stuff, which again, you don't totally need. It's fine to just be just die anonymous, but like it's kind of interesting to be able to walk up to any graveyard, any grave and any graveyard around you and meet a person, so to speak.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. Do you think that in the afterlife that people with like big statues for graves, like they have extra riches and things like that?
I don't know, but I love those people. I hope they do, because I don't know, those really make a graveyard special, right? And you're like, especially when you erect this nice statue, beautiful angel with flowing hair and a beautiful upturned face, and then 20 years later it's just like a hollow-eyed demon because of all the weathering and stuff. I'm just like so happy. Like statuary, again, graveyards to me, they're like their nature and their art and their history, and they're private, they're away from everybody else. But I love the statuary. The statuary is my favorite. But again, nobody creates a statue to be spooky at all, but every single one goes spooky at some point.
I'm still sort of hung up on your comment about the macabre being just dead bodies, and I'm curious. I just recently finished a book called Wasteland: The Great War and the Origins of Modern Horror by W. Scott Poole. Yeah. Oh my God, you need to read this.
It's on my list. It's totally on my list.
Yeah, it's not simply. It's a history lesson about World War I. Starts with World War I and how that influenced all of the great horror filmmakers. Nosferatu and Frankenstein and all of the people that were in that, Vincent Price, like everybody who was contributing to this new wave of storytelling, all were influenced by or taking stuff from the Great War, and then World War II, and then the Vietnam War. And it was all just every horror movie is a war metaphor.
Makes sense. I mean, the Tom Savini story, right, where he was just a war photographer in the Vietnam War, where he just take pictures of corpses. That was kind of his job. Then he would go whatever after he got out of the war. He just like made corpses for a living. It just a one-to-one direct connection.
Yeah, and now he is and has been one of the most famous sort of special effects artists in Hollywood.
Premier, yeah. Who doesn't love Maniac?
So how many books have you written? Is this like 11 books or something like that?
So the ones out right now, like physically on shelves or in the cyberspace, whatever. Ooh, that's an old term. Or out in the servers, is I have 8 books out, and then this year, 2022, I have 2 books coming out in the fall. So by the end of this year, it'll be 10 books.
Very cool. Congrats.
Thank you.
I'm curious because I see that you've written fiction as well. What do you like to write more, and what's your favorite book that you've written?
Yeah, so here's it's an interesting push and pull, right? I like to write nonfiction more. I mean, don't tell any of my publishers this, but like I like to write nonfiction more. But the reasons are, A, it's more natural to me. I mean, the way I'm talking right now to you is literally how I write, which is whatever. Some people hate, some people like, but I write very casually. So it comes to me easily, the sentence construction, it all just kind of flows. So I like that. And I like that every nonfiction book is an experience. We talked about Salem being a year of my life. You know, if I didn't get a book after Salem, after that experience, it wouldn't have mattered. You know, that book was a cherry. That experience was everything. I've met new friends as a result of nonfiction books. I've had experiences that I'll take with me to my grave, wherever that is. So much more fulfilling. Meanwhile, writing a novel, you're sitting where I'm sitting right now and just writing. It's I can't remember who said it, but like writing isn't living, which is obviously it's a problematic statement in a lot of ways, but it has a truth to it, right? Writing is writing. It's not living. So, you know, I've always been able to, with nonfiction, it becomes obviously it's a writing exercise, but it's also meeting people. It's also traveling. It's taking my family on experiences. So I'm able to, you know, instead of like ignoring my family, you know, wherever they are where I'm writing, I get to take them to see these cool things that I get to see to write about. So I love nonfiction. That's how I started. It's what's I'm more natural at. That said, fiction has a cash it to it, right? So, you know, to make a living at writing, you can't really do that. You can't do it in any writing, but like there's more of a chance that fiction will reach more people. Put it that way. More people read fiction than nonfiction. So fiction gives you an opportunity to, you know, to reach a bigger audience, and you own it more, right? This thing came out of my head. There's a pride in owning it, right? You could say about my books, like, yeah, good. Salem was a good book, but only because Salem is an awesome city, or Poe Land was a good book, but only because Poe was an awesome dude. And there's a big, gigantic truth to that. Whereas if you just pull it out of your own head and somebody likes that book, it's a very special feeling. And that's really why I like novel writing. You know, I like to tell stories, but you can tell stories in nonfiction just as easily as you can in fiction. It's just being able to make something just with your own hands, out of your own brain and experiences, is extremely satisfying and much harder for me to do. I'm not as good at fiction as I am at nonfiction, honestly. I mean, buy all my books, but I'm not as good at
novels. This is a question I just thought of right now, and I apologize if it doesn't come out the way I want it to, and we stutter through this for a little bit, but is there anything going on currently today that you're looking at, thinking to yourself, man, at 30 years from now, I'd like to write about that in a historical way?
Historical way. That's a good question. Yeah, there's a couple things, right? So I kind of alluded to this earlier, but the direction we're going with our dead is fascinating to me, right? People are wanting to, you know, it does feel weird to take up entire acres of the world with dead people, just to put dead people in the ground. So, you know, and obviously it's very costly. So the tend toward green funerals and the tend toward cremation and all those things where, you know, instead of going outside and seeing your grandfather's grave, your grandfather's right there in the urn on the mantelpiece. I think that, you know, what we do with our dead is a fascinating topic. And I think right now we're in this kind of transition zone where everything's kind of possible. I feel like there's a few people out there, like Caitlin Doherty comes to mind, who are trying to push what we're allowed to do with our dead. And there's like, you know, there's like melting them down and feeding them to certain animals. And there's like all these other, you know, attempts to figure out how to like make a much more planet-friendly corpse, I guess, at the end of the day, as opposed to like whatever, formaldehyding ourselves, sticking ourselves in wooden boxes inside of concrete bunkers and then burying us underground, which makes total sense. But that transition of what we do with our dead to me is fascinating. The other thing I bring up, I think I tease this all the time, but the nonfiction book I really want to write that I haven't been able to sell yet for various reasons, is kind of a follow-up to Salem. And it focuses on Sleepy Hollow, New York, which is, in my mind, a proto-Salem. So like, it's one of those towns, if I could have written about Sleepy Hollow, New York 10 years ago, it would be a way different book than if I wrote about it now. And if I wait 10 years, it's going to be a way different book than if I wrote it right now, because it's become more and more and more a Halloween destination. And it's in some ways very similar to Salem in that it's, you know, 15 minutes away from a major metropolis. It's right there in the Hudson Valley, right near Manhattan, just like Salem's right near Boston. It's during Halloween, it swells with people. It's different in that it's not built on a tragedy. It's Halloween cred comes completely from American fiction, from Washington Irving's Sleepy Hollow, but he's so tied up into that place. It's amazing. He lived there. He based the Headless Horseman on it. He's buried there. His house is still there. He is Sleepy Hollow in a lot of ways. So I would love to do the same thing I did in Salem, except with Sleepy Hollow. And the difference would be because right now at their evolution, it's month long, but really only on the weekends. Like they don't do a lot of stuff during the week yet. And the layout of Sleepy Hollow isn't conducive to like tons of people being in there. There's no central area that everybody gathers. Salem has Essex Street Pedestrian Mall, which is like perfect, just party there for days. They don't really have that layout yet. There's like, I've been privy to some plans that they're trying to do that. Maybe they don't have the tourism down yet, the merchandising down yet. But they have the Headless Horse down yet. That thing is everywhere. It's on the recycling bins. It's their mascot for the local high school. It's on the firehouse. There's stained glass windows in the church at the cemetery that are all Washington Irving images. So they kind of have the iconography down, and they have the Halloween down, and more people go every single year. So I would love to do that book, write about that place. So yeah, Death and Sleepy Hollow. Those are the two.
Good answer.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Shannon in the chat wants to be cremated and sprinkled half in my yard and half in your yard, Lance.
Oh, well, that's very sweet.
That was really nice, I thought. Yeah.
That's very sweet. And maybe just because JW is on, maybe you and I can take a pinch of Shannon and just drive it over to him and sprinkle a bit on his yard.
I mean, I think that'd only be fair if you're okay with it, JW. Yeah.
I mean, even if you're not okay with it.
I love that idea. Like I know a few people who've had loved one pass away, and they cremate them, they go on this massive epic journey and just put them all over the world. And it's kind of a really, it's another cool book, of like just spreading somebody across the world is just like a fascinating topic. So is Shannon a friend, or she just pick your yard at random?
She is a friend and listener, and she's in the chat room. There are several people here yucking it up in the chat. It's a grand old time. It seems like YouTube is the place to go where people are congregating for the most active chat this night here tonight.
Oh, and Ginger said she'd like to make a necklace out of a few burnt flakes of Shannon. Oh, that's nice.
Oh.
LA Not So Confidential wants a pinch of Shannon. Oh, everyone wants a little Shannon.
Look at that. See, it's a beautiful thing.
Shannon says Ginger can have her teeth.
I love the direction we've gone in.
We're all like, okay, what point is this awkward? I don't know yet.
We'll go. We'll go there.
And JW, in the interview that is coming out tomorrow on the Crawlspace podcast feed, we speak about a psychic from Salem named Lori, a different Lori though. Her name is Lori Bruno. And we've had her actually as a guest on Crawlspace on a live show going back a few years.
Pack the house.
Yeah, she did pack the house. Yeah, she's very interesting. I'm sure you can imagine she, is, calls herself a witch. She dresses like you would imagine. She's a really wonderful, wonderful woman. And she told me, I swear to God, she told me like 15 years ago that I was going to be hosting a creepy radio show. And it was before the word podcast even existed. I'm going back to like 2007. She was like, it's like a radio show. And it turned out to be true. I like doing true crime. It would have been so much easier to not have this story and to just say all psychics are frauds or whatever. And, they never have led law enforcement to a body. It's all bullshit. But I have this experience. Please help me make sense of this. What do you think of this?
It's a good question. I've done a lot of psychics. It's a very uncomfortable situation every time. I find myself rooting for them. Like I'm that guy. I don't like awkward situations. I want everything to be really smooth, and I find myself in them all the time. And when you're talking to us, like I've had so many that were just wrong and so many that were just vague, and you're just like, no, I just need you to say one thing that I can just hook onto and help you out. I'll help you out as much as just say one thing And I've had some right guesses or some right readings, but I don't know. If you talk to enough people and you say enough things, I think the stats say you will, you'll hit some right. If it's like fishing, right? You throw, if you know nothing about fishing and throw the lure out enough times, you're going to catch a fish at some time if you just keep doing it. So I have to think that there's some of that involved. Maybe you just have a face for radio, man. Maybe that's just what she saw in you and just said, you know what, this guy should be on the radio. No, I'm just kidding. No, but like they're also really good at reading people. There's people that are really good at reading people. That's just when it comes down to, we're very readable people if you look for the signs and you have the skill set, and they usually have the skill set. I mean, they hone it and they can like, see things about you. But again, it's such a grab bag. You can tell like there's some that have no talent for it and some that are just kind of reaching or vague generalities, if it's a woman and she's a certain age, and you find out if she has children or not, you're like, you're going to have a child. It's an easy one. Right. But yeah, but I think they definitely hit it sometimes. Sometimes it's spooky how much they hit it. And and again, you're in this situation where it's just you and the psychic and not the entire world. So you don't really think about the context of how many people she's told the same story to maybe. But sometimes, they just nail it. I always think if you bring up the Cursed Objects book, there is this story, real story. I write about James Dean's cursed Porsche, the one he died in. When he got it, he barely had driven it. He was gonna break it in at the Salinas Raceway. That's what he was driving to when he died. He bought it. He's already a movie star, one movie out, two under his belt that were coming out. And he was, I think it was in LA, but he was somewhere, and he had his Porsche there, and he ran into Sir Alec Guinness, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who wasn't Obi-Wan Kenobi yet at this time. He wouldn't be Obi-Wan Kenobi for 20 years. He was at the time Oscar award-winning Sir Alec Guinness. He was a real actor. And Alec Guinness said to him, cool car. I assume there's some chit chat, but he said to him, "You're going to die in that thing." And you can just, I don't know the tone he said it in. It could have been something like that, like, "Oh, you're going to drive a fast car, you're going to die in it." But literally said those words to him, and a week later, James Dean died in that thing. And there's a YouTube interview of Alec Guinness talking about that story. So it's not like, it's not even hearsay. It's him saying, "I don't know why I said it. It's very spooky to me now." But something happened there in that moment that could have been, again, you can write it off as just saying, yeah, it's a fast car. It's an easy thing to say. I might have said the same thing to him if I saw him sitting around a Porsche. But, Alec Guinness said it, and it happened. So there's some kind of connection there that, haunted Alex Guinness for the rest of his life, for sure. So I don't know. Sometimes you just know things for sure.
The deciding factor for me that Lori Bruno is legit is the live show that we did was located in Davis Square in Somerville. I don't know if you've ever been to Davis Square in Somerville, on a Saturday night, in the, like, not in the winter. This is prime foot traffic, car traffic, Saturday night, Davis Square. I mean, good luck finding parking anywhere close. And on the way over, I was concerned that she wasn't going to be able to find parking. And I was almost kicking myself like, oh, we should have set it up so like she could get picked up and dropped off. And then next thing you know, she's there. And the person she was with was concerned that that they weren't going to find parking. And they pulled up and they were concerned. And Lori goes, "We'll park right out front." And they come into Davis Square just as a car is leaving, right in front of the theater doors, and they slide right in.
Yeah, no, to me, that's way more supernatural than guessing your future, for sure. That's a super hard thing to do.
I was speechless for minutes.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. Yeah, she's an interesting lady. And it is a complicated relationship I think we have with psychics, and it sounds like you do it as well.
Yes.
And I've definitely been to bad ones.
Yeah, but they make a living at it. So you have to say either they're really good at it, or they're right, or my challenging moment is I love that they're doing this. I love weird people and people that do weird things and people that do things out of the norm, and they fit that to a T, right? And then there's like con people that do it, and then it's such a fraught profession. But that's also why I'm a big fan of the idea. I don't know. Again, as you can see, I'm conflicted about it, but I love that they exist. At the same time, I kind of want to debunk it, and at the same time, I don't want to debunk it. So it's just my usual like kind of torn upness.
Have you ever heard of the Dean murder mystery in Jaffrey, New Hampshire? Because I feel like you need to work on a project about that.
Jaffrey, New Hampshire is not super far from me. The Dean, no, maybe not. Maybe,
we
maybe
need
not.
we need to talk about this. The
Yeah,
Dean murder mystery.
No, it doesn't strike any clue in my head.
Offline, we'll talk about it. That's the town I grew up in, Jaffrey, and it was this unsolved murder from 1918.
Oh, cool. No, I'm down with that for sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, we'll get back to the show now. Shannon just bought one of your books.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. I super appreciate that. Hope you dig it for sure.
I thought you were going to say, Shannon, I hope you burn that with like the cremation.
Well, don't steal cursed objects. This is something we cover right at the top of tomorrow's interview. You curse anyone who steals the book Cursed Objects. Yep. And it's scary. Don't do it, anyone.
Yep,
anyone listening.
We curse the book. If you steal it, you're in trouble. Like if you buy it, you're fine. If you borrow it, you're fine. But if you steal it, you are actually cursed.
And you did not steal that snappy blazer and hat behind you. Little bit of history on that, because I think that's really cool.
Well, the hat's mine. There's nothing interesting about that. I just needed a place to hang it. My flat caps. But the blazer is the legendary Ray Bradbury's. I'm put this way, I'm bad at being a fan of general, but I am a fan of Ray Bradbury. I kind of worship at his work. He has a joy and a darkness to his writing that I love and can, I'm trying to aim for that every day and I can't. I'm too cynical or whatever. But like he has like this like life to his words. So at some point I decided to, I'm a collector. I just have to collect. And for decades I was collecting mass market things, which is not the way to go. Then I met a lot of weirdos with really cool collections over the course of doing what I do. And they all have very unique collections, one of a kind collections. And they all told me like how to collect. Basically, they told me what is fulfilling and what's good about collecting and what's bad about collecting. So at some point I landed on Ray Bradbury artifacts. I wanted to collect Ray Bradbury artifacts. And that jacket that I have behind me on the dresser's dummy he wore it in Ireland when he was writing the script for Moby Dick for John Huston. And I think John Huston might have bought it for him. I can't remember, but he bought it especially for Ireland, wore it in Ireland while he was writing the script. And he wrote a book called Green Shadows, White Whale, which is a collection of semi-nonfiction, fiction short stories based on his time in Ireland, hanging out at pubs and trying to figure out this play and how to deal with John Huston, who's very hard to deal with. And it's one of my favorite books by him. And so knowing I have a piece of his clothing that he wore while, experiencing all those experiences in Green Shadows, White Whale, this was one of my favorite pieces I have.
I'm going to pose a question to Tim now. Tim, if you had a piece of clothing from someone that you idolized, who would that be? And what article of clothing would you prefer?
Like movie memorabilia or I guess pop culture or something.
I think just in general, the same passion that JW had about this jacket.
Okay. So not a personal, like I didn't know this person necessarily.
True.
But
yes.
I have some kind of connection with. Geez, I would kind of lean towards Jack Nicholson just stuff. Like I feel I love Jack Nicholson. Like a Joker outfit or something from the 89 Batman is kind of where I go right away, I think. But if I'm going a little deeper, I'd go like something Andy Kaufman-esque, I think.
Ooh.
I'm a huge fan of Andy Kaufman and his crazy
wrestling
work.
Tights, maybe.
Yeah, something like that. I think that might be my flavor.
It's wild. I mean, that's the only piece of clothing I own by him. The rest is artifacts, but it's really hard to own clothes that you value, because I know people that collect costumes from movies, and you have to either just if it's a tchotchke, you put it on a shelf and it looks kind of cool. With clothing, you got to figure out how to display it, or if you're going to display it at all. If you don't display it, what are you going to do with it? You're going to fold it and put it in a bag underneath your bed. It's like you have to figure out how to display a robe or like a shirt or a pair of pants. You have to, and then once you're displaying it, it immediately sticks out as weird, right? You guys nailed it right away. That all the weird stuff behind me. You're like, why is there a jacket on a dummy behind you? Are you like a seamstress? It's just a very weird kind of situation.
And In promoting your appearance, we called you a Halloween aficionado. It might not have been the right term, but you celebrate Halloween for 2 months.
Yeah, totally.
And you actually say something funny about comparing it to a one night stand during the interview that we have, and I'm not going to give any spoilers on that, but it was pretty funny.
Yeah, maybe I was drinking. I use sexual metaphors if I drink too much, but yeah, no, it's what happened is I didn't celebrate Halloween for a very long time as a kid. Again, I was in that religious world, but at some point I fell in love with it, and it kind of turned into Halloween in fall, right? So one of the reasons I moved up to New England, it's creepy, but the falls are gorgeous. You know, these white churches and these colorful hills, and old architecture and old stones behind that, and all the best autumn pictures are in whatever New England, whatever. But so it's all one thing to me, and I want to celebrate all that. I have all these things I want to do, that everybody wants to do. You want to do a corn maze, you want to go apple picking, you want to carve your pumpkins, you want to watch your horror movies, you want to go to your haunted houses. And I realized two things. I didn't have enough time to do that in a week or a weekend or one day that Halloween is celebrated. If you celebrate Halloween for just one day, I mean, how many movies could you watch? How many haunted houses could you go to? So I needed multiple weekends. And because everybody works, it can't be like every day you're at work and stuff. So I had to kept spreading out. And the Burr month, September and October, always seemed spooky to me, right? August is awful. It doesn't seem anything interesting. But the second you hit September 1st, another reason why I moved to New England is because September 1st in Mid-Atlantic is still like clammy and awful. But up here, if it's the right year, it'll start getting cold at September 1st. So you have these 2 months. And on top of that, I decorate really hardcore. Like outside, I decorate the exterior of my house, even though I live on a dead end. It's dumb, but I do. But inside, we kind of like wallpaper and Halloween. We put lights up. We put these skeletons behind me are everywhere. And you're just in this cocoon. And when you walk in the door and you're just like bathed in orange and purple and black, you're just like, this is home. And you can do that if you do it for 2 months, you can do that for 60 days. It's like an alternate, suddenly for 2 months, you're living in this alternate universe where your house is weird, where the rest of the country is celebrating, right? You got monsters on your cookie packages in the shopping malls or shopping at grocery stores. You've got like commercials all with Dracula, and then suddenly you've got this entire movie marathons and horror movie marathons on every single channel. Suddenly you have everybody celebrating this weird thing that you love, and it's really giving into that alternate universe feel. And so that's why I do it for 2 months. If I did it for less, I used to do it for about a month and a half, because again, I wanted that first cold day, the first day I put a sweater on to be this kickoff. But that became, sometimes it was September 12th, 15th, whatever. But eventually just 2 months out of the 12 months of the year, I'm doing this. And the one night stand comment was, once it hits November 1st, I have to get it all down. I have to rip it all down, because it just feels perverse to have it up still, to be looking at my jack-o'-lanterns on my floors after Halloween. Feels like I'm and I know people that celebrate Halloween year round, and that's fine. But once, I definitely don't want to celebrate it when it's hot. I lived in Florida for a few years, and those are my worst Halloweens. I don't want to celebrate when it's hot. There's snow on the ground. It's kind of fun to have like a snow day in October, but in December, you're kind of like moved on. So that's kind of where that is. It has to be ephemeral. It has to go away for me. The Halloween, not the macabre. That like I wrote an article on my site last year where I try to kind of tell you what's the difference between celebrating Halloween and celebrating the macabre. It's two different things. But Halloween has to be ephemeral. It has to go away. I have to long for it at some point in the summer. Some hot, nasty summer day, I'd be like, man, I wish it was sweater weather and I had a horror movie on and there was a thunderstorm and whatever pumpkin scented candles going. I want that. And then, and once I have it for 2 months.
What's your kickoff? What's your kickoff horror movie when you get into the Halloween season?
Oh, it's different. It's so funny these days where it's getting rough. Actually, it's a really good question, because it's getting rough. Because back in the day, you had a very constrained list, right? You had the one, and you had to own them. These days, where you have every single movie on the entire planet at the touch of your fingers, it's starting to get hard, because you want to balance it between your traditional movies that you watch every year and new movies. And then you find new movies you like, something they're traditional, and then you're like, I have too much. You can literally spend the 60 days of Halloween inside watching horror movies and specials and stuff, because there's just so much episodes, right? We're at this point, and I remember telling my wife one day, like way back in the day, saying, man, I wish you could find Halloween episodes of sitcoms. I wish you could just find them and just like watch them. Nowadays, every streaming service has a whole section, but nowadays the streaming services have a whole section where you can just watch Halloween episodes. Disney has it, HBO has it.
You invented YouTube.
Yes, YouTube, exactly. The number of obscure specials that I've watched off YouTube just thrown right to your TV now. There's too much media now, so I don't have a ton of traditional ones anymore. And a lot of times, my wife's not a huge horror fan, so a lot of my fun is and during those 2 months, she's much more amenable to it. I introduced her to Halloween movies she'd never seen. I showed her Texas Chainsaw, and I showed her Scream, and I showed her Halloween, and I showed her Halloween 3. So I get to watch her reactions to this. So it can vary. The only things I have to watch every year are Garfield's Halloween special. I have to watch it every year. I used to say the Charlie Brown special, but now that it's on Apple TV, I missed it the past 2 years. Now that Apple owns it, I missed it the past 2 years. And then usually Trick or Treat's right up there.
Trick or Treat's good.
Trick or Treat's good.
Trick or Treat's really good. That's a good example of one where whatever. I'm going to show my age here, but before Trick or Treat, now the first time you watch Trick or Treat, you have to watch it every Halloween. Now it's that Halloween movie. The Hocus Pocus, right? Somehow not somehow, it's because of ABC Family. Somehow that's become an inextricable part of Halloween now. I always watch that one. I end up watching it 80 times throughout the 2 months, but in snippets, right? I'll see the first 5 minutes here, the last 5 minutes over there. Then it's always kind of on. Nightmare Before Christmas is a big one for us. Paranorman is a big one for us. There's just so many Halloween set movies now. And back in the day, there wasn't that many. There just wasn't that many. Not that many that were good either. So it's just harder now to have a traditional set that we look forward to every year.
Speaking of Halloween movies that aren't very good, you mentioned Halloween 3.
It's getting a pretty good reaction in the comments that you went from Halloween, Halloween 3.
Okay, good. I have a couple reasons for that. One is, my wife isn't a horror fan, so she had no idea that Halloween 3 didn't have Michael Myers. So I wanted to have this time box moment where in real time, because I was too young to know the phenomenon back then. In real time, I watched somebody learn that Michael Myers isn't in Halloween 3. I was like, that's what I wanted to do. That's exactly why we watched it. I am actually not a fan of that movie. I know it's got a huge cred now. Everybody loves it. Everybody thinks it's like a great movie. I think it's in the ideal, it's a great movie. Like when I describe the plot, I'm like, that is a great movie. But then when I watch it, I feel like it's very lackluster.
Not actually fun to watch. Yeah.
Yes, but that's
I like how you did it as a goof. You wanted to get the reaction.
That's my life. But it's a horror heresy to say that Halloween 3 is not that good. But these days anyway. But I don't think it is. But again, I wanted to watch somebody miss Mike Myers. Like, I don't know how people get the opportunity to say, I lived through 1983 in my house. 2 Halloween to get started.
Yeah, it is funny how that switched with Halloween 3. I feel like it used to just get trashed like years ago, and now it is kind of not polite, or is not really appropriate to do. It's kind of had almost like a hipster resurgence.
It's like the PBR of horror movies. It's like it's not good.
So
I think this might be the most controversial thing we talked about tonight is Halloween
3. So your wife knew that Michael Myers is in the Halloween series, but you're like, oh, let's watch this Halloween movie, and you popped it in and just watched her reaction to like, when is Michael Myers showing up?
Yeah, and you know what happened is she didn't react to it. So we sat there, right? So we had just watched Halloween 2 the night before, right? So I made sure she saw that one. And then I kept like looking at her like, when is she gonna ask the question? Is she gonna say, where's Michael Myers? Didn't ask the question. Ask the goddamn question. Why didn't you ask me where Michael Myers is? And the entire movie, she didn't ask the question. So I was like, so afterwards for this bit that I do for the Otis blog, I interview her after the movie and say, what did you think of the movie? And I'm like, so you didn't ask me about Mike Myers. She's like, yeah. I'm like, did you miss him? He was in the first 2 movies, wasn't in the third one. She's like, it just didn't feel like a Michael Myers movie. Like just the first few frames was pretty obviously not a Michael Myers movie. So it was like not a surprise to her. Like it was like, obviously this isn't a Mike Myers movie, and they just did that. Like it wasn't like a heresy to her. It wasn't any kind of big reaction. I had that happen with a friend of mine. Did you guys ever see The Village? M. Night Shyamalan's The Village?
Yes.
I sat through that movie with a friend, and whatever. Everybody who hasn't seen it, put your earmuffs on. 'Cause I'm about to spoil the heck out of it. So you watch this movie that looks like it's set in the colonial times, and the big reveal at the end is it's not set in colonial times. And then we watched it. I love that movie. I turned to the person afterwards, like, man, that was a big twist. And they're like, what was the twist? I'm like, the twist in the movie. Did you fall asleep? I didn't see a twist. I'm like, no. Look, it was colonial times. And then it wasn't colonial times. She was like, yeah, but they never said at the beginning that they were in colonial times. All because they didn't put like a little little whatever, a date at the bottom of the beginning of the movie. Right. She just assumed that it was modern times and they were just Amish or something like that. So it wasn't a twist for her the entire time. And I was like, I bought in wholesale. I was like, oh, it's obviously colonial times. I wasn't looking for that like date at the bottom that she had to have to tell her. I don't know. It's amazing like how much we assume. Like I don't know. Everybody comes to movies their own way. It's so great.
Yeah, I remember the marketing with that movie, The Village, I think had some people confused because I think it was, people were expecting more of a thriller. And I agree. I think the movie was really good, but I think a lot of people kind of watched it once and was like, what the heck? Why is there no, I get the twist, but why are there no scares, or not enough scares or whatever?
Yeah, I was boggled by that. I mean, I was a big M. Night fan I bought in on him completely up until whatever, Lady in the Water. But like, I thought that was a great movie. I mean, people, I guess other more whatever, people knew more movies more than I did were kind of tired of that twist, but I thought it was like fantastic.
I thought it was pretty good too. I think we should probably wrap up pretty soon. We've hit the hour, but
we went to an hour. We raced right to the hour.
I have to confess that I liked The Happening.
Did you?
I mean, I know it's crazy and cheesy and everything, but that's kind of why I loved it. Like, they're afraid of the wind. Holy shit. Like that fucking, when they're afraid of the wind, I'm like, wow.
Here, well, let me help you out with that one. So I've only seen it once. I hated it, but I haven't seen it a second time. You have to before you really talk about a movie. But Bradbury himself wrote a short story where the wind was the bad guy. It's this guy in his house and the wind's trying to get in at him. It's rattling. It's a very, very effective story. I think they made an episode of it in Ray Bradbury Theater. He had that anthology show. And it's really effective. So the idea is solid. Being afraid of the wind or plant. In this case, it was like plants throwing spores and whatever. I can't remember. It's been a while, but like, it's one of my movies I have to go back and rewatch. I keep waiting for the M. Night Shyamalan Renaissance, which is every once in a while seems like it's there. Then it goes away. It gets old. Kind of killed it for a little bit. But like, I'm rooting for that guy for sure.
Yeah, I always root for him too. Old was okay. I watched it recently. It was also, you know what? Also, like, I think that's part of what he does, at least lately, is it's kind of unintentionally funny at times. And I don't think he cares. I think that's just part of how he entertains.
Yeah, he's at the point now where he can just do it. He's got an idea and he can make it happen. He's got enough of a following. He lost me after Signs, the second viewing of Signs. I was like, this doesn't even make sense.
That one, I haven't analyzed that one. That one's another one I think I like. It's been a long time since I've seen
aliens
that one too,
aliens who are afraid of water. Water kills them, and they invade a planet that's covered in 80% water. I mean, that just doesn't work.
Their planet was dying, Lance.
Yeah, and water kills all of us. We're all gonna be, we all could drown in water. So I don't know, but you might be right. You might be right.
Before we wrap up, can you show us your cursed object?
Oh yeah. So whatever, because I do first person travel logs, I have to. I don't write books, to be. I'm very indulgent in my writing. I write about myself in my books, even if it's about cursed objects. So one of the things I had to do for this project was to buy a cursed object, which I still own. Right here. Right beside my Dawn of the Dead CD that I bought at the Monroeville Mall.
Nice.
It's it's a brass bulldog that I bought on eBay because I do a whole section in the book in Cursed Objects about the business of cursed objects. Because people want cursed objects, they buy them, they sell them, they collect them. So I figured if I was gonna, really get the idea, if I was gonna write about other cursed objects, I had to have the idea of what it felt like to have a cursed object in my house. At least an object that somebody said was cursed. So I went out and bought it on eBay for like $11.
And I'm going to interrupt you right there and say, for more of the story, you need to tune into the episode tomorrow.
Good. That saves.
I didn't even plan for that, and then I realized we're giving away the farm here on everything.
I know, that's great. Thank you for that. It saved me from the story.
It's a great tease. Well, thank you so much.
Big league tease right there. Big market tease.
Thank you so much for joining us here tonight, JW Oker, and everybody listening at home, JW Author. And check out all of his books, Oker of many books, especially Incredible books. Cursed Objects. Check that one out. I promise you will love our conversation on the Crawlspace feed tomorrow. JW, thank you.
Appreciate it. This is a blast, guys.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us. I feel like we're getting into a rhythm here. And you, sir, are welcome back anytime. Open door policy.
Yeah, just send me a link. I'll be there.
Send me a link and I'll be there. Awesome. Well,
sounds good.
See you in 2 weeks.